Hi, I'm Chris Gata. I'm a junior at Swarthmore College and a Chester Community Fellow. So we've been working this summer at various organizations based in the city of Chester, and our ultimate goal was to create an asset map describing the resources available in the city of Chester that folks can benefit from. Very excited to bring to you today an interview with Dr. Mark Winston, who's the executive director of the Crozer Library, to describe some exciting programs that they offer.
Hello everyone, and welcome to our podcast episode today. My name is Nader Al-Madbouh, and I'm a Swarthmore student from Bethlehem, Palestine. I speak both Arabic and English, and I'm a member of the Chester Community Fellowship here at Swarthmore. I'm also a prospective engineering major.
Hello, I'm Caden Fullerton, also a Swarthmore student, and I'm from Delaware, and I'm also a Chester Community Fellow, and I'm a prospective computer science major.
Today, we're going to talk about one of the most valuable assets in the city of Chester, the J. Lewis Crozer Library. And we are delighted to welcome its executive director, Dr. Mark Winston. Dr. Winston, thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure to talk with you.
So, Dr. Winston, please tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Be my pleasure to do that. I have been executive director of the Crozer Library for a little over 3 years. Prior to that, I was the development officer and head of adult programming for the library. However, most of my professional background has been in the university setting, either as a university faculty member, teaching at Rutgers and University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, or working in administrative positions in university libraries. My research and scholarship have focused on issues of leadership in organizations, aspects of diversity, economic inequality, and access to information. I've also done quite a bit of work in urban settings as well. Newark, New Jersey, for example, and Chester, Pennsylvania. Looking forward to talking with you today about the library.
Pretty interesting. Yeah, thank you so much for this.
Yeah, sounds like you have a great background.
Ooh.
So can you please tell us a bit more about the Crozer Library and its history in the city of Chester?
Sure. The Crozer Library's history actually dates back to the mid-1700s when community residents identified the need and potential for developing a book collection for members of the community. And that continued for about 100 years, at which point there was further discussion about the value of establishing a space to foster conversation and support reading in the community, particularly in the evening, to foster, I think, a greater sense of community. Over time, the library service within the city expanded ultimately to a number of physical locations in the building, growing ultimately to 3 locations in the city. And then in 1925, the family of J. Lewis Crozer made a donation to the library based upon a bequest from the family, at which time the library's name was changed to the J. Lewis Crozer Library. The other two locations, we're currently now in the 3rd of the 3 locations. The other 2 locations went into disrepair over time, and now we are located in what was the West End branch of the Chester Library. We have a pretty active program of providing access to a collection that consists of over 40,000 books, as well as many journals and music and movies and so on. And we're also a member of the Delaware County Libraries, which is a group of independent organizations, of which the Crozer Library is one. So a total of 26 libraries in the county, and we do collective purchasing. So we also provide access to over 25,000 ebooks as well as a couple of hundred research databases on all sorts of subjects, science, business, health, and so on. We also provide access to the collections of the other 25 libraries, so an individual is able to make a request to us to purchase, to borrow an item that belongs to the Middletown Library, the Swarthmore Library, the Radnor Library, for example. And we also provide access to online homework help, tutoring, and so on. Particularly in the city of Chester, the services we provide are also important. In addition to being one of the few Wi-Fi hotspots in the city, we provide services related to faxing, photocopying, printing through the library as well. And we do a wide range of programming for children, teens, and adults as well.
Wow, that's really impressive. I'm wondering, are there other libraries in Chester that provide like this amount of resources? I would assume that the Crozer Library is one of the few libraries with that many resources.
We are the only library in Chester, other than Widener University's library. We're working with the schools as they develop libraries. As far as we know, based upon all of our research, there aren't functioning school libraries in any of the schools, public, charter, or the smaller schools in the city. So we are the one library that's open to everyone in the city of Chester. Yes. Some of the services are provided. For example, there are one or two businesses that offer faxing services, for example, but generally speaking, certainly not the range of services that we offer.
Well, that's really wonderful. And as you just mentioned, Crozer Library has many essential, services to the community, including internet access, printing, faxing, and copying services. For jobs requiring fax timesheets, Crozer Library is one of the only accessible options in Chester, in fact. And I was wondering, about how did COVID-19, especially under the circumstances that we're in now, how did COVID-19 affect the library's ability to provide these services to the residents, and what services are still being provided through the library in these difficult times?
Yes, this is a really important question. It affected our ability to deliver services in a major way. With the statewide shutdown and the stay-at-home order, the library was closed from mid-March for a period of a little over 3 months. So we were not able to provide any in-person services at all. Relatively quickly, we began offering some virtual, that is online programming for children. But when the state moved to the green phase, we were able to begin to offer services through the building again. So as you know, that has not been very long. We are offering curbside pickup so that patrons can reserve, let us know via email or phone which items in our collection or in the other libraries' collections they would like to borrow. Again, books, CDs, DVDs, and they're able to pick those up at the library through a curbside pickup process, which would be similar to what would happen with restaurants, for example. Our goal is to focus on thinking really carefully about the health and safety of the individuals who use the library as well as our staff. So it's a particularly complicated question for us. So we're defining how we can begin to resume first faxing and photocopying services so that patrons are able to bring items to us, the staff are able to complete the service, and provide the items to the patrons in as safe a way as possible. We are also working on the process of setting up a service by which patrons can email documents to us, and then they can be printed for them as well. We're making information available on 2 commercial establishments that provide faxing as well. So we're attempting to make that information available. We're working on getting an estimate to expand our Wi-Fi access to the bulk of the park that surrounds the library building. So individuals are able to use their own devices to have access to the internet generally, but also to our content as well. So we're moving in the direction of offering more. Ultimately, likely the most complicated question relates to the public computers that are available in the library. We provide internet access, access to the Microsoft suite, and so on. And the complication with the public computers is the fact that the building, all things considered, is a relatively small building. So the configuration of the computers was not designed around the idea of social distancing. That wasn't a consideration at that time. So we have obtained an estimate for to identify the cost for reconfiguring. Now, this is also the case. The building was built in the late 1970s, and is true for a lot of buildings built at that time. The electrical outlets that were put in place were not based around a system where there were mobile devices at all. So essentially, the functioning outlets are along the perimeter of the building, which greatly limits our ability to place computers in any other locations in the building. So we've submitted a grant proposal to get funding to reconfigure that space so it's safe for patrons to work at the public computers. Of the 26 libraries within the county, Crozer Library realizes the third highest level of use of public computers in the county, which is pretty substantial given their communities that are much larger than Chester. So it's a major, it's a particularly important service in the community. So we're moving in that direction. I would also say we have a particular issue because the most current data indicates that Delaware County leads the state in the number of COVID cases reported since the end of June. So of all of the counties in the state, Delaware County has reported the largest number. And it's also the case that Chester, as well as Upper Darby and Middletown, are the states with the highest number of new cases as well. So we have to be particularly careful in how we think about how we begin to offer services and look to ultimately reopening the building. But with the numbers that we're seeing, we have to be particularly careful.
And I love the fact that through these difficult circumstances, all of it, COVID, the rising number of cases, pretty much the third wave of COVID at this point, that you're still providing access to people through phone, email, and providing them with the basic services that they actually need, and even beyond basic services. I think that's really cool, and yeah, thank you for doing that.
Thank you. We're trying. We're trying. Yes. There's more we hope to do. Yeah.
So yeah, you were saying that like the library, it's like you said the third highest computer usage in the county, which is like very high. So obviously the community really needs these services. So our next question is, what is the timeline for reopening the library for in-person use? And more specifically, what is the timeline? Because you mentioned the grant proposal, and that seems like it's going to be a pretty big thing to getting the computers back up and running. So like the timeline for in-person action and also the timeline for the computers in particular.
This is also a key question, something we discuss daily as we do our planning. And this most recent data that I described about the number of cases in the county and Chester being one of the 3 communities with the highest number of new cases, that data was released yesterday. So this is an ongoing, clearly a bit of a moving target situation. So we are looking carefully at the planning. Our original goal was to begin offering in-person services, that is opening the doors to the public at the beginning of August. But this new data clearly indicates that that's probably not the best idea. It's also the case that there are also a limited number of people that we can have in the building simply based upon the general occupancy requirements, the state guidelines related to the percentage of what would be not 100% of our occupancy, but a smaller percentage, 25 or 50% of occupancy, as well as making sure we have the most effective cleaning, sanitizing procedures in place when we reopen. So the beginning of August, or the August date, is clearly changing. It's likely we're looking at the questions of September, but we're being really careful to not be definitive about when this is going to happen. It's such a key question you're asking. It's just that we don't want to promise when we aren't doing what is the most responsible, making the most responsible decision. So we were hoping for an early fall opening, that is September, at least beginning to offer more services. And it's certainly the case that we may be able to offer more, such as the faxing, photocopying, and certainly the emailing documents for printing. We should be able to do that relatively quickly. So it's likely that that will happen August, hopefully early August. The faxing and photocopying with staff completing the faxing and photocopying based on instructions from patrons. We are hoping that may be able to happen in August as well. But resuming our programming and computer use is particularly complicated. We want to do the right thing, and our building we see many people who are older adults, we see many children, and so on in the building. So we're being as careful as we can in making that decision.
So you mentioned that the occupancy, like according to the state regulations, will be like up to 25 or up to 50% max. And like, I'm wondering how much is 50% in Crozer Library's numbers?
Yeah, our number would be about 50 people, including staff, if we were at 50%. However, the way the building is structured and the guidance related to 25%, that would be 25 people, including the staff. So that's not a lot of people given how actively used the building is typically. So it's a small number of people given what is typical for the use of the building.
But also that's only the services that are in person, right? Because there are other ones that are just remote that you're also offering to the people. And maybe another question is like, where should people go to figure that out? Like, should they check your website regarding opening times, services that are being offered or will be offered soon in August? Where can they find these information?
Absolutely. We try to keep the website as current as possible, defining where we are, and certainly as we anticipate that defining new services as they're offered or new modes of delivering services. So the website, we use our social media postings as well. However, we also work with partner organizations to communicate these messages. We work with, for example, the Chester Education Foundation, so we provide that organization. They're really tremendous. We do a monthly newsletter also, and the Chester Education Foundation pulls information from the newsletter, which is tremendous. We send information to other partner organizations as well. We do some signage, but this has been, I think, the major issue we realized with the closing, because much like your situation with the college and in the K through 12 setting, this really came out of nowhere, at least the closing question and the need to move to virtual programming. So your classes quickly went online, I'm sure. That had to happen in the K through 12 setting. Our programming had to go virtual immediately. And it's a bit of a process. So it's an ongoing sort of how we can most effectively do all of this, given everything, both quickly but also well.
Yeah, so I'm sure some challenges have been faced. Like COVID was absolutely, an absolutely unexpected challenge, but there are also good stuff about Crozer Library. In fact, that's the subject of our next question. So, in much of 2019, the head of the adult programming position was vacant, and as a result, there were fewer adult programs than anticipated. What new programs can Chester residents anticipate in 2020? And how would they look like in terms of being in person, remote, or hybrid?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Certainly, we know that we will be offering quite a number of remote virtual programs. When it is safe to do so, we will be offering in-person programming. And there's potential for hybrid-related programming. And I'll say a little bit about sort of formats and platforms and modes of delivery, and then certainly quite a bit about content, program content. Where our focus will be live stream programming. Programming is happening live, as well as the fact that we are recording YouTube videos for a number of types of programming. So, for example, we are promoting programming related to how to use Zoom, for example, because there's a segment of population that's been using Zoom through the whole closing and prior to that time, but that's not the entire population by any stretch. So we're doing a how-to video on how to access Zoom, how to use Zoom for programming, how to search the library catalog, a range of technology-related programs. Again, the live streaming programs, and these likely will include some technology by appointment programs, so an individual is able to live stream with a library staff person about a particular technology question. I'm putting a resume together, I'm doing this, I'm connecting to the internet, but I'm having trouble with this particular function, for example. The in-person programming is tricky because, as you well know, about the discussion of groups assembling, groups over a certain size. This is something we have to do very responsibly, certainly. And the library delivers programming both within the library building, but also in other places, such as in classrooms, in the schools, in the Boys and Girls Club, for example, and the Housing Authority. So we are also taking the cue from, for example, the schools in terms of what they're defining about whether they will be doing virtual or in-person programming. In terms of content, the library does health-related programming, for example. In the past, we've done diabetes prevention programs, nutrition programs, heart health programs. The next program we're likely to offer, which is in planning now, is a program related to Alzheimer's. The diagnosis rate related to Alzheimer's is particularly high in the African American community. So that's one of the first programs we will be doing. We do finance-related programs. We've worked with an organization called the Chester Community Improvement Project to offer home ownership workshops, and we're going to continue and expand the finance programs. We do general literacy-related programs. The Literacy Council in the county does most of that, but we do some of that with adults. Most of our reading-related programming is with children. Reading education is with children and teens. But we also do programming for parents to provide guidelines, information on how to effectively read to children in a way that's likely to foster learning as much as possible. We've done a lot of civic literacy programs. For example, the Constitution Center, located in Philadelphia, has done programming in the library. We think we're the only public library in the country that has offered programming through the Constitution Center. We also are offering art programs. We're hoping to offer those as soon as possible as well, so that, for example, an artist is able to do a painting program. We're able to work with participants who have canvases and paints and so on, and are able to paint along with an instructor. We do movie screenings. We do author events. We have had book clubs in the past. We have resumed one of those, and we're hoping to resume others, and including doing a teen book club as well. So there's a pretty wide range in terms of programs. We also, again, offer programs through the Boys and Girls Club. We offer programming, reading support programming through the Chester Housing Authority, that is the public housing locations as well. What we're hoping to do, I mean, the pandemic and the move to virtual programming is major, obviously. What we're hoping to do, which is something which is quite different for public libraries, in addition to having presenters who do one-time programs, we are developing a model of adjunct faculty, which is similar to what you'd see in a university setting, where there are individuals who develop an ongoing relationship with the organization and deliver programming over time, multiple programs. So we are working on developing a faculty that's national. So if an individual is in California and is the expert on the subject, we're able to engage that person to deliver a program for Chester residents independent of geography, so that we can offer a range of programming that wouldn't be typical. So if we're working with an author, a person who's published a book that is particularly important and particularly relevant to the Chester community, and the author lives in Vermont, we're able to deliver that program remotely so that residents are able to take advantage of that. So I hope that helps in terms of both the content, but also how we are doing some things which are pretty atypical for public libraries.
And also things that are pretty diverse, like you mentioned collaboration with the Chester Housing Authority, the Chester Education Foundation. You mentioned one thing that really caught my eye was like the programming with I'm sorry, I think I might have froze on my computer. It might take a second. Okay, I think we're back to normal. Yeah, so one thing that caught my eye is like really the health programs that you're making, especially Alzheimer's. I have a very close relative to me who has Alzheimer, and it was like one of the issues about it was like a delayed detection. Like the people did not figure it out as early as they should have. So I think that's the content that you're offering is like pretty valuable. So that's really cool. I love how diverse things are, how rich the library operates. So really cool.
Residents deserve it, so it's our goal.
I'm sure.
Yeah, personally, I also like the idea of having like experts from like out of state being able to deliver programming. So that's like one of the benefits of doing things virtually is like otherwise you wouldn't really have access to these kind of like programs. But so there's always some good and bad, which is nice.
Absolutely. And the cost is such that even if there are cases where individuals there would be some charge for their time, for their presenting, we don't have transportation costs or accommodation costs. So it's a major benefit in this regard. Yes.
Yeah. So that's very good. So we kind of want to shift our focus now to like the school districts. So I believe it was this Wednesday, if I recall correctly, that the Chester Upland School District released their plans to stay closed all the way through 2020 with the possibility of maybe reopening in 2021. So we were kind of wondering, like, how does the Chester Crozer Library's like services shift to meet these demands of the students who are going to be doing everything virtually?
This is a pretty major shift because our approach in the past, both with the Chester Upland School District as well as some of our programming with the Chester Community Charter School and with some of the early childhood daycare centers and so on, has been to offer programming in person, either in the library or for librarians to go into the classrooms. So this is a major change, but something we had generally been thinking about, but certainly over the last 3 or 4 months, we have known we had to move in this direction. We've been discussing virtual prior to this time, but clearly it's become inevitable. So there are a couple of things we're hoping to do. One is through either the portals that the school systems are using for us to offer content and programming, but also through the course management systems that the school systems are using to offer content that we can make available that the teachers and students are able to access, but also that we can live stream programming and interaction. So if you think about the fact that a school doesn't have a functioning library, all of that support that would be provided for the students through that school library, we are attempting to offer that kind of support through the public library, through as many grades, working with as many teachers and classes as possible. Now, in this regard, part of our goal is to try to tie in the focus on supporting the assignments in whatever discipline, social studies, history, science, so that we're able to support the students in, for example, the research that's required for those courses, but also if we can build in reading enhancement activities. So the ideal situation involves our working with the teacher to look at what the teacher's goals are, as also in addition to where the students are performing at that point, to offer programming and offer another instructor in the form of the librarian who's able to offer some other content. The one thing we often try to do is to fold in content that's clearly, I would think of curriculum related or reading enhancement related with things such as physical activity, for example, or if we, for example, do a nutrition program, we have in the past tried to do programming that offered some hands-on. So we did an Eating the Alphabet program. So children as they're learning the alphabet, we provide the opportunity to taste foods that begin with the letter A during the first week, letter B during the second week. Now, how we creatively modify with virtual programming is going to be particularly tricky. However, the person who started as the library's head of programming at the end of June has many years of experience as an educator and an administrator in the K through 12 environment, but also in the university environment. And she has her degrees, undergraduate, graduate degrees, and doctorate in essentially all areas of education, from elementary education through higher ed and adult education. So we are folding in, we're bringing in the expertise that's needed to provide the level of support that the residents deserve. So some of this is going to be the creativity, and some of it's going to be the cutting edge research related to how one teaches reading, for example, so that the programs are fun, that they supplement what's happening in the classroom, but that they are clearly based on what the science says about what's likely to work and enhancing. Because as we've talked about in our prior discussion, the reading levels among students in Chester is a call to action. And they're an issue at all grade levels, and it's clearly a crisis situation. And if we consider the fact that the school year, the in-person school year ended in March, and that the move to virtual is a tricky, complicated process and didn't happen overnight. And it's also the case that there's often a summer slide during the summer where there's a bit of a regression in terms of student progress during the school year. And it seems very likely that that summer slide was just accelerated and will be greater because of how the school year ended. And because of the fact that students have been away from the teachers for so long. So we're, I think, taking a really thoughtful process in engaging with the schools. There's a new superintendent in Chester Upland, so we're hoping to work with her, work with principals, as well as work with individual teachers, most importantly.
I like that, and that kind of answers what I had as another question, which is like specific programs that the library has with schools, in particular for reading. And I think, yeah, that's been a pretty good insight about that. I'm not sure, do you have anything else to add specifically about programs with schools, like with teachers, not only services for students?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, clearly, using the course content as our basis, so it's most efficient for the student. The expectations that the teacher identifies as the basis for the learning is clearly key. This is a tricky process because, as you imagine, the number of school buildings there are in a city like Chester, having the staff to deploy to fully support the programming and the instruction in the schools is a challenge. So if we're able to work with seventh graders in the sciences, and we're able to work with third graders with the writing teacher, and we're able to work with the kindergarten teachers, the multiple ways to try to reach young people, but we know we will not be able to see everyone, which is always a disappointment. So we also work with after-school programs, for example, attempt to multiple ways to do this. But also with our staffing, we pursue grant funding to bring in staff beyond the regular full-time staff of the library. So as a matter of fact, we're hiring a part-time librarian who will be working. The person's role will be that of embedded teaching librarian. So will be the person who's teaching in many of these locations. He or she will be both our eyes and ears, but also an instructor whose role it is for this to happen. We have a pending grant proposal to deliver programming with Chester Eastside's after-school program, as well as working with the early childhood centers and a range of organizations. So it's a process, but the big challenge is, of course, this move to virtual, but also just a number of young people.
So how many staff members are there currently in the library?
We have 10 positions, which is given serving a population the size we're serving with the other needs, requires a particular level of creativity, I think. But pursuing the grant funding, puts us in a position to expand that number, at least temporarily, as the particular grant funds are in place. But yes, it is a challenge.
So yeah, you said how like the Crozer Library has like a big role that it plays in like all the Chester schools, especially since everything's going virtual. They're not going to have library access, and most of them didn't really have it inside their schools before COVID either. So ideally, like in the future, say like 5 years from now, what do you see the library's role being in Chester education?
Oh, well, it's a great question. Tough question, and I'm glad you snuck in a question you hadn't prepared me for. So it's a good question. I'm hoping that we see a couple of things. I'm hoping that we see enhanced reading levels, so higher reading levels. I'm hoping that we see enhanced access to books and other resources. It's difficult to isolate when you see that type of data that there's an improvement, to isolate what caused that improvement, because there are multiple inputs. But I hope if we see increases in reading levels, more teachers who are able to integrate the library support in their courses, and I think the level of student use of the resources, the online resources, including the tutoring resources, I think will be a tremendous success for us. So that we're able to actually measure increases in, reading levels, for example, but we're also able to see greater engagement among the students. I mean, certainly when we think of, for example, where you are in the college setting, the preparation that's needed in order for you to complete the projects, the assignments, the research that's required, we want to provide the level of support that prepares the students as fully as possible. We also want to provide services such as assisting students with things such as developing research skills to research careers, college majors, financial aid, and so on. The things that really can be of direct benefit to them on a regular basis. Now, of course, we also hope we're offering more services by that time. We hope we have more staff positions by that time. We also hope there are more Swarthmore students who are working with us on a regular basis to help us to design and deliver programs. So I love the "what would you like to see" question, because we're working towards it. So I'm particularly pleased about that question.
Yeah, definitely. Because I mean, always having a vision of how you want to be in the future, even if you set it very high, if you fall short, you still make it very far. So I think having that kind of mindset is always good.
It's critical. And we have a bold vision for the library. There's simply no question about that. Yes.
Yeah, and also, I mean, like switching to online and virtual programming, that has been a challenge for everyone, even for us at Swarthmore. We've tried to switch, but like not everyone coped well with it. Not all courses were as great. Of course, many courses were great, but just like the swift switch was rough for everyone. But hopefully now that we've had some time to actually, prepare all of us around the world in the U.S. and any institution that provides services virtually, I think now we can have some extra time to prepare, and hopefully that will help us be better in the future. Also, you just mentioned that you're working towards helping people, individuals work on researching universities, finding scholarships, and applying for grants. And I'm wondering, like, we heard about something in my notes was like there is the Jeddah Center in the city of Chester. I'm wondering if you can tell us more about that and whether or not the Crozer Library is involved with it.
Sure. Up until about a year and a half ago, maybe, there was an organization called the College Resource Center, College Access Center, which was a joint entity supported by the local colleges and universities, including Swarthmore. Housed in a location on or just bordering Widener's campus with the mission of providing that level of support for students in Delaware County. That organization closed, and the Chester Education Foundation has been asked to take on that role now. So that the Jeddah Center came into being with this goal of providing support for young people in doing this kind of research preparation and so on. I think certainly the Chester Education Foundation, as well as other organizations, also offer tutoring and preparation for some of the placement testing as well. So certainly logical placement for such an entity. I was a part of the planning, certainly at least the initial planning for this new center. One of my certainly questions, because I think it's clearly fulfilling a tremendous need, will relate to how the library can also provide support both from a different physical location in the city, because the Chester Education Foundation is located in one part of the city and the library in another part of the city, how we can support the programming that's happening through that center as well. In both cases, it's a major undertaking because of the number of, in this case, high school students in the city. Large number of students, yes.
Yeah, and I think, especially support for college students is pretty immense. I'm Palestinian, and I grew up all my life in Palestine. Then I wanted to apply to universities in the United States, and I was like, okay, I don't have that establishment, that supports researching colleges, extensively, especially in the United States system and everything else. So, and navigating the system, even for students who are domestic, is really challenging because there are a lot of things that you have to consider. Some colleges are very competitive. Some scholarships are very competitive. So I think that would be an immense help to everyone who will have access to college support. Yeah.
And I think the library is well positioned to do that because we support research, right? So if one is researching majors, if one is researching a job outlook for a particular profession, one is researching college rankings, the library is in a really good position to offer that support. Yes.
Yeah, and I agree. Like, I was in the same position as Nader, where it's like, where I went to school, we didn't have anything like the Jeddah Center. And like, even when I heard about it, I was really excited because, I mean, just having this as a resource for students is like fantastic.
Yeah, and I was lucky I had the Education USA. There is an American organization that works with, I think, Ahmed East too. It operates in many countries. One of them is Palestine. It's called Education USA. It's basically positioned just to help foreign students outside of the United States apply to colleges in the United States, and yeah, like they guided me through the process. I've had help from many people, like as I was working, but it definitely is essential to have people who are really supporting you every step of the way. Your SATs, your application, your statement, and everything. Yeah. I'm really excited. I'm really excited for it too. I'm very happy to help if there is anything I can help with.
Chester Education Foundation deserves credit for taking the lead in this important area. Yes.
So yeah, that's the extent of our questions that we have. And we were wondering if you had any like closing statement or message you would like to tell the community about. Just like sign us off.
Well, I certainly appreciate the opportunity to talk about the library. I supporting the residents of Chester is a noble undertaking for us. I think if I had one question, it would be to ask the two of you, now that you have done research on the library and we've talked a couple of times and you've done research and learned about other organizations, I'd like to invite you to work with the library on how we fulfill our mission. So I look forward to hearing how you might be able to do that. Yeah.
So yeah, me and Nader, it's actually really convenient because especially after like learning more today, we feel really excited because we're currently working with the Housing Authority to make like a program of our own, like an introduction to computer science course. So Nader can tell you a bit more about that, and I can kind of tell you like how we envision our role could be in aiding the library.
And also, we've been very lucky to work. So just a little bit of background about what we're doing in Chester. So we're part of the Chester Housing Authority. We're working with the Chester Housing Authority, so we're part of their team now. But we got introduced to the Chester Housing Authority through the Chester Community Fellowship that's offered by the Lang Center in Swarthmore College. And what we've basically done this whole summer is that we've worked with community partners from Chester, Devon, Stefan, and other people who actually are involved in the Chester community. And we've been involved with multiple organizations. We have done a lot of reading, we've done a lot of projects as well with Chester. So we've gotten familiar with the environment, and this is the basis of our course. So Kieran and I have done some research, have contacted some community partners, and we figured out that there was a lack of computer science education in Chester. So we decided to create an online course that's an introduction to computer science course to introduce to the community and to everyone actually who would like to take that course. Our main idea was to make that course accessible for everyone. So everyone with internet connection can take our course. The unique thing about our course is, first, it's free. The cost of maintenance is $0. No one has to pay any dollars over the next 10 years to maintain the course. The third is everything can be done online. So usually when you think about coding, you think about that difficult subject that you have to figure out on your own. You have to download programs, and we call them IDEs, which are like environments where you can develop code. And it's such a complicated process, but it's not. We're making it a very, very simple one. If you have internet access, you can take the course fully online using only your web browser. Even if you have a phone, you can take the course to the fullest extent. So that's the interesting and unique part of our project. Ideally, you would need a computer or like a small laptop or a Chromebook, but if you have a phone or a tablet, that's pretty sufficient for you to take the course. We're offering the course so it can be self-taught, like people can actually watch tutorials that will walk them through everything that they need to know. We're going to provide exercises, additional resources. We're going to offer possible paths of continuation if they wanted to learn more computer science. Where can they go and how can they do that? So it's an all-inclusive course that's available for everyone and anyone. And a course that can be taken at your own time, at your own pace, a course that doesn't require money to be maintained. And there is also a component where not only are we just offering a course that we're going to upload online in a very structured form and have people take it, but we're also going to try to create projects and summer camps and after-school activities, which Kieran will now tell you about, that revolve around that course and that actually engage with the community in a more intimate and in-person way.
So yeah, right now we're still in the process of developing the course, but we do envision it. So while it does have the possibility of being done all online, like you can just watch the videos and go through it and not need an instructor, obviously having a teacher there to aid you if you get stuck is going to help, because even though we're making it in such a way where it's like we're thinking about every way a student could get stuck and trying to cover that, obviously like this is still the infant stage, so there's going to be stuff that we miss, and also just having like the structure of a teacher helps when learning. So the way it can work with the library is we were thinking, especially since you want to keep adding programs and your mission statement, like the first part of it is literally like expanding the access of knowledge. And that's something that, like Nader was saying, we identified that Chester doesn't really have access to computer science knowledge. And me personally, like my stake in it is that like where I grew up, I didn't really learn about computer science until I was like 18, like going off to college. And I wish I knew about it a little bit earlier, because one, I could have kept learning, because there's so many online resources that we're going to be like pointing people to after our course. So we kind of just want to like get their toes wet with it, kind of learn what it is, experience it, like something that they probably would not see if they didn't have access to this course. So our role is we can think about maybe doing like in-person stuff there. So like you were saying, you're actually trying to get the grant to social distance your computer lab. So we can have like instructors go in there, host workshops there. Or if you want to do like online programming with it, we can serve as like online teachers as well.
I think it's tremendous.
And also the course is going to be online, so anytime you would like, so we're also, this is another thing, Kieran and I are offering tutoring for people in Chester currently who are over the age of 18 years old, because that's the age we're legally allowed to engage with. But however, that's going to change. We're in the process of getting clearances. So we can actually work with people to be instructors for these programs. So we're working with multiple community partners who are looking forward to establishing after-school activities, summer programs, and other stuff that work with our course. And we want instructors, people who are capable to stand in front of a room full of individuals and like teach them computer science when they're stuck, or like help them when they're stuck. So Kieran and I are offering to teach a couple of individuals how to be instructors by teaching them the course in person, not only online. And then possibly in the future, these people can work with other activities and organizations in Chester to help them create their own computer science workshops. So this is something that we can also help with. If you have a staff member, if you have anyone who would like to learn computer science to then apply it and share that knowledge with the community, we're more than happy to engage with that and help you do that. Absolutely. Plus, you're going to have the knowledge once we record the course and once we finish it. You're going to have the knowledge accessible online anytime you want. And we're going to be available if you wanted to reach with us. So we're pretty much open to any type of collaboration with the library. We'd gladly help.
Wonderful. Well, we accept. That's the first part of my answer. So that's a yes. I also think your presence as potential mentors as well will be tremendous, where you can engage as instructors, but also, and I'm thinking of the range of audiences you could work with, including young people who have the question, I'm thinking about becoming a computer science major, or I don't know what I'm going to major in, and for you two of you to talk about your story and to talk about your decision, I think will be particularly beneficial. So I think the program sounds great, and we are looking forward to partnering.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And yeah, definitely. I did not know that I might major in computer. I did not know that I liked computer science until I came to Swarthmore and took the first introductory course. And then it hit me. I want to do engineering and maybe a second major, computer science now. So hopefully that will, like, I think access to knowledge really affects people's lives. I've been one who have been affected by that. So I would happily share that with other people as well. Thank you so much for being with us here today.
It's indeed my pleasure to do that. I'm Stefan Roots, who I know the two of you work with, who's a part of your group. If I can end a quote, he's a well-known journalist, blogger, certainly in the Chester community, highly regarded. He wrote a story about the library that he described as the most awesome public space in the city of Chester. So I owe it to the library to say those words.
Yeah, you owe it to everyone, in fact, to say those words. Yeah. So thank you so much. We really appreciate it. We were very glad to meet with you today. I think this concludes our podcast episode for today. But yeah, and we're looking forward to seeing your great contributions through the library in the future. Thank you.
It was a pleasure to talk with you. Thank you for the invitation, and I'm glad we'll be working together.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care, friends.
See you.